a Marcene Glover, or here in Italy, Marcena, I'm usually called. I'll tell you a little bit about my work and then about the residency here at San Cresci. So I spent several years as a portrait artist, and I still enjoy making large figural works. I always like to include symbolism in the paintings. I don't feel connected to the Western traditions of perspective with placement of foreground and background. I relate more closely to early Eastern landscape painting, where the foreground is brought forward into the same plane with the host or the subject. I like to divide those spaces with a clearly marked line, usually sometimes in gold, to mark the barrier and show where what I bring forward is a symbolic realm for aspirations, and then show a barrier for that inspiration to break through that. I started layering to point out dualities, and that we're constantly choosing what to focus on and what to give our attention to. Just like it's important to look deeper into our everyday lives and our surroundings and pay attention to really understand a subject and try and look from the other perspective. Another way I've shown that is by layering the wax in between different glazed images, so you have to look through one to see the other, and it makes you choose where to put your focus. It's kind of hard to give a quick answer when people ask me what I paint, because they expect an answer like landscapes, still life, or portraiture, but I don't feel like my paintings fit into any of those categories. I end up painting abstracted landscapes, stylized landscapes, but it's only meant as a metaphor to call attention to how elements in nature interact with each other, as a reminder of how people interact with each other, and also how communities affect one another. My work is actually about movement. The idea that movement is that each moment is transient, and one moment is affecting the next, just like we're affected by our past. So I paint the wind. Here in the orchards, I don't paint the olive tree, I paint about the olive tree. I paint the wind rushing through its leaves, and I paint the roots growing, reaching down into the earth through settlement layers and into the soil, shifting it. My paintings try to describe the tree rather than show it to you. The drips and fluid washes of paint help carry that feeling of movement. I also leave the drips in places where you can see evidence of the paint having moved, as a reminder to the viewer that the artist was there making that mark, that the artist created that piece as a conversation starter with the viewer. So I leave some ambiguity, only suggesting content, so that there's more room for individual interpretation. I wanted to explore that further. I wanted to really rely less on symbols and see if I could develop my mark-making patterns to where they become like a hieroglyph to carry the message themselves. So that's what I focused on in this residency in San Cresci. I studied patterns all around me. I followed jagged shadow lines from grapevines and ripple patterns in the lake to River Arno, and I walked and sketched and chased shadows across ancient textured sidewalks through Montefiore Alley. I thought about the nature of the way things grow and move, and I incorporated that into my painting. So I continued to paint about the olive tree and water and thoughts being carried through the air. I looked at earlier paintings that I had done of water, and you can see that I'm concerned with the surface patterns, but also the underlying activity. I challenged myself to take that further, abstracting to get the most extreme painting for a lot of activity under the surface, and this is what I came up with. I wanted it to match my other mark making from my current paintings, but give all that movement. So that gives me a range between that very active painting to this more calm, broken down, simplified representation of water and air and those spaces. So now I know my range. I know to give a more peaceful feel, reflective, or more active, and those are my extremes. So I opened up my toolbox, in other words, and learned better control of what tools I have, so that I can make more informed choices when I paint. So these are some for you to interpret. The ones, again, with the gold line, where there's a barrier, and they're about the other shapes, how they relate to that barrier line, how they attempt to break through, much like in our lives, how we interact with barriers, how we push forward, and how much we look to the other perspective. So this piece is about keeping childhood memories and about pulling that past forward with us. So another challenge I gave myself here at Cresci in the residency to strengthen my visual communication skills was to better describe that reference to the past, remembering history, and hearing the voices of our ancestors. So I've never worked this way before, but with me I brought along some fiber work. My mother, Dory Sheridan, was a fiber artist. I brought some of her pieces to incorporate into my paintings. So the way I tried that out was to make a box inset and place them in there, and then to have those rhythms flow out onto the surface of the painting. There's a detail of that. And it's very interesting, I thought, that my mom as a little girl, her grandfather was a carpet weaver, and she would sit and watch him make carpets and wait for him to get to the end of the spool, because when he ran out of a piece of yarn, she would be able to keep the spool to play with. So, and then in her own artwork, she sometimes referenced that, using yarns and referring back to those memories with him. So the patterns are, you can see in the next slide coming up, where those strings, I actually used some cord in this piece, because when I went to incorporate the two types of medium together, there was a little gap. I needed something in between, so I looked around the studio and I found a spool of cord. So I used that. It was the perfect size to make that transition between 2D to 3D elements, and it's mixed right in with the paint, carrying her message. There you see some of them, the tendrils dripping down to represent the growth and the flow of the roots and passing of time and history. So I will work this way again in some of my work. I'll use this method again of bringing the past forward. And I like that it literally is in the distance a little bit, and it's flowing forward, being treated currently. Oh, and it was after I put that together that I remembered my mom's stories. So I thought it was, I didn't think of it at the time, and then afterward it was so clear, and it was nice how it came full circle. So I've learned a lot in this residency. My time here at Cresci has helped me build better connection with my own skills, better connection, a good connection with other artists from other cultures. And it's been a wonderful experience. It's opened the door for future collaborations. And Mima and Duccio are great hosts who really help an artist to feel immersed in the rich, vibrant arts community here. So, grazie, grazie.